My name's Heather Hardison. I'm a sign painter. I consider myself an artist and designer, and I'm interested in bringing traditional hand skills back into design. I graduated from North Carolina State's College of Design in 2009 with a bachelor's in art and design, which, if you'll recall, that was like the midst of the recession, and I had a school portfolio mixed with photographs and paintings and illustration, and it was just all over the place. So then when I went to apply for design jobs, people were kind of like, why are you showing me these paintings? And I was like, I don't know, a job please. So I sort of felt like my design career was dead on arrival, but I was like working in cafes and restaurants and having a lot of fun, but I wanted a job where I could continue learning and gain mastery in a skill. And I knew I wanted to draw and paint, but I didn't really know what that career path might look like. I moved to the Bay Area shortly after I finished school. And as I was exploring San Francisco, I would see these like gorgeous hand-painted signs everywhere I went. And they always caught my eye and left me wondering who made them. So I did a little research, and I tracked down that most of them were coming out of a sign shop called New Bohemia Signs, which is in south of Market in San Francisco. I had never even considered sign painting as a career option. I didn't even really know that it was a job, but I immediately knew that it would be right for me. So I worked up the courage to go by the shop. I painted a few little sample signs, and I went by New Bohemia and basically asked them, will you teach me? I had really good timing at the time. Josh Luke, who is an excellent sign painter, was leaving to start his own shop in Boston. So they had room to teach somebody, and next thing I knew, I had landed myself an apprenticeship. New Bohemia was a great fit for me. I fell in love with letter forms and the craft of painting, of sign painting while I was there. I worked with them for about 6 years. And while I was there, I really came to appreciate the power of the handmade mark. Hand-painted signage really stands out and grabs your attention in a cityscape of vinyl and digitally printed signs. The visual language of hand-painted signs is personable and gives a sense of timelessness that adds respectability to your craft. It's like a well-tailored suit for your storefront. Hand-painted signs let your customers know that you plan on sticking around for a while and you take pride in your business. People just love the unique things about their city, and hand-painted signs are the visual representation of shops, bars, and cafes, basically the people that make a particular place special. And people feel ownership and pride of their city when it's unique. Sign painting was once the only game in town when it came to signs on storefronts, windows, or trucks, but the craft was nearly killed by the emergence of the vinyl plotter in the 1980s. The ease and affordability of making vinyl signage ran most sign painters out of business. As sign painters and hand-painted signs disappeared, cities lost their distinctive visual landscape, and it was replaced with homogeneous designs that were created with standardized sign maker software and slapped up on windows or sign blanks. I grew up in the era after the vinyl plotter. And I wasn't even aware of sign painting as a career because the profession had been so decimated. And it wasn't until I moved to San Francisco, a place that thankfully remained supportive of sign painters, that I was exposed to it. Let's just let this finish. Okay. Luckily, there's been a resurgence in interest and in the craft of sign painting in the last decade. And it's not because those quick and easy ways of producing signage has faded from prominence, but because people have realized that hand-painted signs set them apart. There's almost a 30-year generational gap in most painters working today. They're the old-timers who are largely in their 60s and 70s that managed to hang on to their craft after the emergence of the vinyl plotter, and there's folks like myself who are under 40 and are still working on mastering their craft. There wasn't a fluid flow of information between generations of people working in the profession because of that gap. And there wasn't new books being published on the subject, and most trade schools that once offered sign painting courses stopped offering those classes. I think LA Trade Tech is one of the only places in the country that you can still study sign painting at a trade school. I'm part of a new generation of sign painters, and we have to reach into the past to find the methods and information to make us stronger craftspeople. Some of my favorite books on lettering, gilding, and painting techniques were first printed in the 1950s, and they're out of print and hard to find, and often kind of problematic, like always referring to the painter as a he, and like referring to graceful curves of the letter form as like feminine lady part. I don't know. I'm just like, this isn't for me. The culture of sign painters working before the vinyl plotter was really closed. There were so many painters at the time that the field was very competitive and a little cutthroat. This made many sign painters working in that era really resistant to share information about their skills with one another. As part of a new generation of painters, we are way more open and will gladly share information. We are building the bridges into the past to revive techniques and creating community and around supporting one another by sharing and teaching workshops, publishing zines, and making information available online. I've got a little more designer in me than a lot of sign painters, and being that way, I enjoy finding alternative applications for my hand-painted work. I was eager to find other places that I could apply my hand-painted lettering beyond storefronts. And I had that opportunity when I wrote and illustrated my book, Homegrown Illustrated Bites from Your Garden to Your Table. It's an illustrated guide to growing and cooking your own food that walks you through the entire process of planting, harvesting, preparing, and cooking seasonal produce. It was a true passion project that encompassed all of my skills and interests. And I had full creative control of the project. I wrote and illustrated the book, and I designed the layout. I had my hands on every aspect of the book. I used hand-painted lettering and illustration as much as possible. I just filled it to the gills. Along with being fully illustrated, all of chapter openers, sections, and headers were hand-painted. I drew and painted the lettering at a scale that I was comfortable and quick working at, and I then photographed it and scaled it down and colored it digitally. I chose to paint all of the lettering by hand because I knew it would make my book unique and distinctly mine. The lettering and the illustration would make it stand apart from other cookbooks on the shelf because they mostly utilize photographs and fonts. I just love the quality of hand-painted type with illustration. To me, it just adds a lot of warmth. Last summer, I had the opportunity to work as a designer in resident in Facebook's Analog Research Laboratory. The Analog Lab was a great fit because they really appreciate handmade processes in their design work. The Analog Research Lab functions as the screen printing shop for Facebook and creates poster campaigns for campus. It's basically Facebook's Ministry of Propaganda. While I was working with them, I made screen printed posters from my hand-painted designs that address the culture of busyness and practicing mindfulness. Hopefully to remind Facebook employees that even though one of the core company values is to move fast, it's equally important to slow down and to take your time. It's interesting to look back on all the projects that I've had the opportunity to work on: books, signs, murals, posters, logos, and labels. It's a wide range of projects for a wide range of clients, both big and small. From super small food producers that only sell their products at the farmer's market to some of the largest tech companies in the world. I think what they're all attracted to in my work is the warmth of the handmade quality. What they're trying to say when they hire me to make work for them is that this is by and for humans. For the farmers and the artisans that I've worked with, it makes a lot of sense that they would want their businesses and their handmade goods represented by images and lettering that's also carefully crafted by hand. For Facebook, I believe the reason that we worked well together is they recognize the importance of humanizing their spaces and their product. They recognize that you still need the human touch in the digital age. As our environment becomes increasingly digital and homogenized, the handmade mark becomes even more powerful because it stands out. Work made by hand is distinctly expressive. There is warmth, energy, and beauty in the perfectly imperfect handmade mark. It's interesting, personable, and it's human. Shortly after my residency at Facebook, 45 was elected, and like many people, this sent me into a tailspin. I felt like I needed to stand up and say something, and with my fresh experience making propaganda posters for Facebook, I decided to put those skills to work and make some propaganda of my own. With a handful of friends, we printed feminist slogans that I painted on protest posters for the Women's March. We printed over 300 posters and gave them away to anyone who wanted one. The posters made it to marches all over the country, from SF to DC and New York. And I also made the files available to anyone who wanted to print one of their own. It was more than a feel-good project. It was an act of resistance and solidarity with the women I made the posters with and to whom I gave them. Recently, I had the opportunity to work with my sister, Tina Hardison. She's a branding designer and also lives in the Bay Area. And we got the chance to rebrand 2 Mile Surf Shop, a mom and pop surf shop in Bolinas, California. It was an excellent opportunity and a great collaboration between the two of us and the owners of the shop. Bolinas is a little hippie enclave and has a very distinctive Northern California vibe. The shop's branding was really generic and not at all fitting with the uniqueness of the place. However, the shop has this really excellent daily surf report that is so very Bolinas, and you should definitely read it sometime because it's amazing. The report has a poetic, consult the crystals, be here now kind of vibe, and we really wanted to bring that voice into their branding. We used my painted lettering to reimagine the logo and create an iconic "to" that could be used alone or as part of the logo lockup. The hand-painted aesthetic captures the laid-back bohemian vibe of Bolinas and the fun of surf culture. And it was used on everything from their online presence to signage, apparel, hats, and stickers. And of course, I painted some signs for them. This particular sign, which is a diagram of the best surfboards to use in Bolinas, I painted for trade for a custom 10-foot nose rider. So cool. It's really fun to work with a lot of smaller mom and pop shops because you can have that flexibility in like your agreements. So I often do trade with with people that I really appreciate what they're doing. It's not a surprise that in the last 10 years we've seen a rise in artisan goods and an increased appreciation of craft. This is a backlash that is correlated directly to the rise of smartphones and our increasingly intimate relationship with technology. People are hungry for human connection, and handmade things gives it to them. In the spirit of shared learning, today you are all my apprentices. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the sign painting process and the tools of the trade. As an apprentice, there's a basic set of skills and materials that you'll need to learn before you can ever begin painting signs. First of all, your brushes. Lettering quills are designed to pull a long monowidth stroke on smooth surfaces. They come in sizes from 0 to 16. The wider the brush, the longer the bristles, and the hairs are all the same length, paletted so that you can palette the brush into a chisel for creating sharp terminals. You pick the brush the size of the letter so that you can paint the letter in the least number of strokes as possible. So for instance, if you're painting a block letter that has a 1/2 inch wide stroke, a size 8 lettering quill should do the trick. One Shot is the sign painter's paint of choice. It is a gloss enamel that is color fast for interior and exterior work. It has self-leveling properties so that it dries flat with few brush strokes. And it was named One Shot to celebrate its opaque coverage, although this was more true before they took the lead out of it. It's now could be more aptly named Two Shot. A maul stick is used to steady your hand while you paint. It guides your brush to pull long lines, and it can be used as a compass to paint around curves. From my understanding, it's more of a West Coast sign painter's tradition. East Coast painters tend to favor a hand-over-hand style for steadying their hand, though I find that cumbersome, but they'll say the same thing about maul sticks. So. Hardener is used. It's a one-shot formulated additive to hasten drying times and extend the color and gloss life of your paint. You only need a few drops. And turpentine is used to thin the paint and improve the flow off of the brush. It preserves the film strength and the gloss of the paint as opposed to mineral spirits. One-shot formulated reducer can also be used, but I prefer the piney scent of turpentine. You might as well enjoy the death of your brain cells. Odorless mineral spirits can be used to clean the paint out of your brushes, and your clean brushes are stored in brush oil. Lettering quills aren't cheap, and this extends their life because you dip the paint in the oil, and then any remaining paint in the brushes won't dry and break off your bristles. Electro Pounce uses an electric current to perforate your paper pattern, so you can transfer your design to the sign board. And pounce pads filled with colored chalk are used to transfer your design from the perforated. I'll show you in a minute. Okay. But before you ever begin painting alphabets, you start with these 6 practice strokes to learn how to handle your brush. For block lettering styles, you're focused on crisp terminals and twisting your brush for smooth curves. For a casual style, you're focused on keeping your brush at a consistent angle and keeping consistent pressure on the brush. Then you move on to practice alphabets and build the muscle memory necessary to quickly and efficiently paint the letter form. You'll paint these practice alphabets again and again and again and again. You'll just build up a stack of practice sheets. And I do a practice sheet every day before I paint a sign for a warm-up. And it's to build the muscle memory so that the movements don't come from up here, they come from here. And you always aspire to greater speed. The only way you can make a living as a sign painter is to do it very quickly and efficiently. Now that you're familiar with the basic skills and materials, it's time to paint an actual sign. The first step is to draw your design to the exact scale required of the sign. Then you cut down your signboard, and you sand and seal the edges. MDO signboard has an epoxy overlay that makes it weatherproof. The only vulnerability to moisture is the cut edges, which is why we seal them with paintable silicone. Then you roll out the background in the one-shot color of your choice. And while you're waiting for the paint to dry, you perforate your paper pattern. The Electro Pounce, does it have sound? Oh well, it makes a crazy noise. The Electro Pounce uses an electric current to burn the little holes in the paper as you trace the design with your stylus. As it completes the circuit, it burns a hole, and the little holes is what you get the chalk through to your design. As you can see here, you pounce it on there, and then when you pull back the pattern, your design is transferred to your signboard. Yeah. Always remember to keep your fingers away from the business end of that Electro Pounce, though. From there, you choose the right brush for the right job, and you begin to paint your design. Sign painting takes a lot of dedication. It takes about a year of practice to learn the very basic skills so that you can start before you can even paint moderately attractive letter forms. From there, there's a million other skills to learn. It takes about 5 years before you've experienced enough different circumstances and materials to consider yourself an accomplished painter. I'm speaking to you as someone who is still learning. I've been painting for about 7 years, and I don't consider myself a master. I've got solid journeyman status, but mastery is still years away. I'm 30, I'm only at the beginning of my career. And this isn't me being humble or having imposter syndrome. It's dedication to the craft and respect for the effort it takes to truly master. My point is, sign painting isn't for those seeking instant gratification. There are no shortcuts, only practice. But the practice is satisfying. The slow and steady improvement is rewarding, and it's an honest day's work. You have to have an attitude from a different time because this is a career from a different time. It requires deep work and commitment, but that's what's to be loved, cherished, and celebrated. Thank you.
So yesterday over dinner, I was asking Heather, how do you convince a business owner to go for an expensive sign over, something cheap that they can have mass produced, vinyl?
Yeah.
And so you're telling me about the hustle.
Oh, yeah.
And tell them about how you guys do it.
Oh, yeah.
So
There's
curious.
like a pretty basic sign painter's hustle, which is like you're walking down the street and you see someone with a shitty sign, and then you go, hey, I can make you something better. Or like you see, like literally the other day I was walking down the road and I saw a new restaurant was going in, and I just stuck my head in, and the chef was there, and I just introduced myself and I was like, let me know if you need a sign, and I'll be by when you open. So it's really very, in that way, direct. But I guess sign painting is in general a little more expensive than like vinyl signs, but that's the selling point, is that it's like more unique, and like you can get exactly what you want, and it will last a long time. Especially like processes like gilding. You'll see gilded signs that are like 50, 60 years old, as long as the people take good care of it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, we have a question on Twitter from Nicholas. Do you believe there is enough of a demand to bring sign painting back into graphic design curricula?
Curricula?
Curricula.
I think sign painting is very different from graphic design. Like I don't necessarily, and most sign painters wouldn't consider themselves graphic designers. There's clearly lots of overlap, but sign painters of old called themselves mechanics. Like it's a really
technical skill.
Yeah, it's a technical skill. So you'll see it more at like trade schools. I bet more trade schools will bring it back. Yeah, but it's very niche.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question from Twitter. What happens when you barely mess up on one of your last letters and it took you so long to do?
Oh, yeah. Well, when you're painting a sign and it's on signboard or glass, you just wipe it. You just like get a cloth and wipe it off.
Yeah.
You don't want to be doing that a lot because, again, like always aspire to greater speed. Like the money making is the efficiency, which is like why, as an apprentice, they're like, you gotta practice this for a year because you're gonna be losing us money if we send you on a job and we thought it was gonna take an hour and you take 5 hours. But when I'm like, I do a lot of work on tracing paper, then that's generally for my like design work if it's an application beyond the storefront. And if I mess up, there's white out, or if it's our X-Acto blade it out, and then also there's Photoshop. So.
Photoshop.
Yeah.
True. Well, let's give Heather another hand down. Thanks.